right. Well, welcome back to the Multiracial Ministry Mindset podcast. We are so glad to have you. My name is Kyle.
I'm Bernard.
And we are your hosts for today.
Yes.
What are we talking about today in Overthrowing Fear?
We overthrow fear by apologizing quickly and fully. Yeah.
Apologizing quickly and fully.
Yeah.
It's the fully part that I think might get some of us today. And it might be stepping on some toes, but we're gonna go there.
We're gonna go there.
All right. So what does it look like in practice to apologize quickly and fully?
We apologize quickly and fully. When we wrong someone, we don't apologize for how they feel.
Whoa. Say that again.
When we wrong someone, we don't apologize for how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
We apologize for what we did. But we don't own more than we did, which would also come from fear. But we do own everything that was genuinely our fault.
Yeah.
We're not afraid to be vulnerable in this way because vulnerability breeds trust on our team and in our ministry.
Yeah.
We are quick to confess and repent to the appropriate people when we have failed in our leadership and in any way. And in this way, we normalize repentance. Our people know that they don't have to be afraid to confess sin to us.
Man. So that is the practice. Why is this important specifically in multiracial ministry?
Well, in multiracial ministry, we're going to hurt each other. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode. Anytime you're mixing all those people, somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Yeah.
And probably sooner than later.
Yeah. Yep. Somebody's going to put their foot in their mouth.
Yep.
Somebody's going to say the wrong thing the wrong way. Somebody's going to look at someone the wrong way or not look at someone at all. And this is true in any community.
Yep.
But it is 10 times more true in multiracial spaces, right?
Yep.
And here's the thing. We will have to listen hard and we'll have to listen well before we even fully know what we've done.
Right.
Because 9 times out of 10, we weren't trying to do it. We really weren't.
Right.
And we don't even see what we've done wrong.
Well, and here's the thing, and you won't even know what you did wrong if that person doesn't even confront you about it.
Right. So if you haven't listened to the episode on leaning into healthy conflict,
right,
you might want to pause this episode and go right back there.
Right.
Because that's the beginning of this process. Right?
Yep.
That it's hard to apologize if you don't know what you've done and nobody tells you you've done anything wrong. But when you are confronted with what you've done wrong, that is when you pause.
Mm-hmm.
And those defensive feelings come up that says, I didn't. You just pause and listen.
Yeah.
And ask questions.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel? What about that made you feel that way? Where is that coming from? And learn about it, right? Because 9 times out of 10, we have no idea where that's coming from in somebody else.
And it's true. Like they say, one of the hardest things for us to say to somebody else is, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. It makes you put all that ego aside, right?
Yeah.
And I think another point, and we made this point a little bit, we touched on it in the introduction episode to the whole podcast on why multiracial, because multiracial implies that we have a shared history.
Yep.
Because race doesn't exist unless there's more than one. And race only exists in order to stratify, right? That is its intention initially.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then just by saying we're multiracial, just by being a multiracial space, we have to acknowledge that we already have a shared history of pain and hurt.
Yeah.
We already have that. Before we ever even met each other, you and I had a shared history of pain and hurt.
Yeah.
And when you have a shared history of pain and hurt, there are things that you can do that are hurtful that would not be hurtful in another context.
Say more about that.
So for example, now I'm not saying this is actually the case. For example, if my wife and I had multiple conversations over many years about how I just don't clean up the dishes after dinner, and that makes her feel alone and unseen and unsupported, and like I'm not a part of this marriage, okay? Those would be some pretty big feelings.
Yeah.
Right? And some really important stuff. So if after dinner one night, I just go sit on the couch without so much as taking my plate up to the sink. Now, look, sitting on a couch, not a sin in itself.
Right.
Nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Out of context. But in context, the context of our shared history of pain and hurt, it's deeply wrong for me to do that.
Right.
So, and I don't even have to mean it. I don't even have to mean it that way. I don't even have to be like really trying to make her feel alone.
Right.
For it to be hurtful and for me to be culpable for it. So I think when we're talking about multiracial context, we need to be aware of our shared history of pain and hurt.
Yep.
And the way in which I might say something that's hurtful, even though in another context it wouldn't be. That doesn't make it okay.
Right. Well, you said that's key. Just because it may not be hurtful in another context does not make it okay.
Right. And just because my intention isn't to hurt anyone.
Right. That doesn't make it okay.
Doesn't make it okay.
Right.
And if you think that we're just making this stuff up, go read Leviticus. Leviticus is all about how to do things that are not okay. And some of the things in Leviticus that God says are sin, he calls unintentional sin. Apparently, you can sin without meaning to.
Yeah.
So it's not just about what's in your heart. That's important, but it is also about the impact of your actions. So and in some ways we've put this as you got to own both your intention and your impact.
Yeah. So I want to get into something here that you're more expert at than me.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. Maybe I'm not going to in a minute. I don't know.
Well, this idea of white guilt. So you could see why you would be more of an expert at it than me.
I can see why you wouldn't have very much experience with that.
Yeah. But I want to just talk about that idea for a minute.
Okay.
And so have at it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So in a multiracial space, you're talking about apologizing.
Yep.
It is something that we should talk about, right? This idea that as a white person, maybe you are guilty for doing something or for inheriting the privileges that are unjust privileges that you hold, that you do hold. That maybe there is something you should feel guilty for by being a descendant of slave owners, by being not even a descendant of slave owners, but just somebody who has inherited the enormous wealth in general in the white community that maybe you didn't earn yourself. You were given it through inheritance. All that to say, there's a lot of conversations in social justice organizing around white guilt. Now, I say that to say most of the actual conversations that are explicit about it are usually, in my experience, to say, don't bring your white guilt in here.
Right. Well, we was part of a group. Well, when we met, and that was one of the things.
Yeah.
Bring your white guilt in here.
Don't bring your white guilt in here. And what happens is there's this really weird dynamic, at least in my experience, is that there are all these things that are being said that make white folks feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like you have implicit bias and you automatically, without thinking, you write some people off or code some people as criminals who aren't, right? For example, that makes me feel bad to think that that's inside of me. That makes me feel guilty, like something is gross inside of me. But then folks will turn around and say, now don't bring your white guilt in here though, right? Because And there's a good reason they say that too.
Right.
Because
Right.
what that ends up doing is that white folks end up going to do social justice work or organizing work and centering their own feelings.
Right.
Instead of the real pain of the people they're intending to serve.
Right.
And that's not helpful. It's like trying to do penance for your racial bias or for the privileges that you've inherited. And doing penance through social justice work just doesn't actually help the folks who are on the underside of the power dynamic.
No.
So one of the things that I think we have as the current resident expert in white guilt, one of the things I think that we have as Christians is an incredible resource for dealing with this dynamic that the world doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, we can tell ourselves the truth about where we are guilty without bringing our white guilt into the multiracial space and living from that place. Why? Because the gospel says you are guilty.
Yeah.
And you're okay.
Yeah.
You are guilty, and Jesus has taken that guilt on himself.
Yeah.
You are guilty, and that guilt was nailed to the cross 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
It is not how God sees you. It is not how you should see yourself.
Yeah.
So you can be honest with yourself about how you feel, about the ways that your bias has showed up in the world, about the privileges that you don't deserve to have, but you do have, and feel conflicted about how you've used.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do your penance.
Yes.
Through social justice organizing. You organize for people of color because you are grateful for them, because you love them, because they are God's children every bit as much as you are, and because you recognize that being free from the corruption of the world means that you help to free your brothers and sisters, right? So the gospel is, I think, fundamentally the reason why we can both apologize quickly and fully, and receive forgiveness quickly and fully.
Yeah. Y'all see why I like him? Y'all see why he's my brother? Yeah. As a resident expert on white guilt, well said.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks. Hey, we were having this conversation the other day. You asked me the question, but I'm going to put the question back to you. When we're talking about guilt, there is one person in particular in Scripture who stands out as having been particularly guilty in huge ways, multiple times. And yet he was called a man after God's own heart. His name was David. Can you tell me about what you said the other day about why you think he was called a man after God's own heart? Even though he was this guilty of a dude.
Right. So I mean, most people, most Christians won't admit it, but David was a horrible friend. He was a horrible dad, and he was a horrible king. He was a horrible friend because we always see Jonathan doing something for him, but we don't never see him doing nothing for Jonathan. He was a horrible dad because anytime your son is looking to kill you, you did something wrong. And he was a horrible. And not to mention his son raped his daughter. And so he did something wrong as a dad. And he was a horrible king because at that time kings went into battle with their troops, and he's back at the garrison kicking back, and he sees his good friend Uriah's wife, and then he has her. So he was a horrible friend, a horrible dad, and a horrible king. But I think what made David a man after God's heart is because when David realized he was wrong, he hurried up and got it straight with God. He hurried up and apologized fully and quickly.
And he didn't say to God, I'm so sorry I made you feel bad.
Right. No,
I'm so sorry you feel that way.
No. It's
about what
more
I
like
did.
creating me a clean heart.
Yeah.
Renew a right spirit in me.
Yeah. Search me and know me.
Yeah.
Find if there's any wicked way in me.
Yes.
What if we asked each other, search me and know me?
Wow.
Find out if there's any wicked way in me.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
How that would change things? It makes me think about 1 John 1-2, right? There's this passage where it says, God is light, and him there's no darkness at all, right? And if you walk in the darkness, you have no fellowship with the light.
Yep.
You're not having fellowship with God. I think a lot of people read that passage and they immediately think that means if you are sinning, you have no fellowship with God.
Yep.
There's no light in you. That's not what John is saying at all. If you read the full context of that passage, he goes on to say, like, the darkness is not confessing. The darkness is not bringing to light the things that you have done, letting light shine on that. If you are living in darkness, that means God is not right next to you.
Yeah. Because
God is light.
Yeah.
And if he's next to you, he's shining on you. You can't be living in darkness. Well, what the light does is it exposes your sin. And John goes on to say, if you say you have no sin, you're a liar, and you're making God out to be a liar, and you're living in darkness.
Yeah. Most black people think, Sanford and Son, you're probably too young.
Oh, I'm definitely too young.
Yeah. Sanford and Son had this nemesis, was his sister-in-law, and her name was Aunt Esther. And Aunt Esther would always say, "You a lie, and the truth ain't in you."
Yeah.
Yeah. People thought she came up with that. That was John.
That was John.
That was John.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Aunt Esther was right. And I think it's important to say, like, what John is saying is the truth isn't in you, not if you do things that are wrong. We all do things that are wrong. So much so that if you say that you haven't, you're a liar.
Right.
So we've all done things that are wrong. The question is, will you allow them to be exposed to the light? Will you confess them when somebody approaches you with the news that you've done something wrong? Because sometimes it's news to you.
Yep.
Will you apologize quickly and fully? Some tips for apologizing quickly and fully. The words "I'm sorry" are really helpful. Not just like, "Man, I didn't know."
Right.
I didn't know.
Right.
Wow. No. I'm sorry is really helpful.
Yeah, and just owning it.
Yeah. Saying, "I'm sorry that I..."
Yeah.
Finish that sentence.
Yeah.
"I'm sorry that I did X, Y, and Z. I'm sorry that I said X, Y, and Z. I shouldn't have done that."
And mean it.
And mean it. Yeah.
Since we always try to point out in these episodes a time where we may have done well with this, a time where we may have done it not so well or poorly, could you remember a time that somebody called you out about something you said in the sermon and you had to apologize quickly and fully for?
I do remember. I remember more than one time, but one time I particularly remember I was preaching a sermon on forgiveness, of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was preaching a sermon on forgiveness, and I used an example that I thought would be particularly culturally relevant to our multiracial context.
Mm-hmm.
It was an example of a young man who had forgiven a police officer who killed his brother.
Yep.
And I had some ideas written out as to what I should say, and I went off script and just, quote unquote, spoke from the heart. For those of you who speak from the heart a lot, just remember that biblical passage where it says the heart is deceitful above all things.
Yeah.
It's not always a good thing to speak from the heart,
especially
when you're preaching. Sometimes you should speak from your notes, especially when it's a pretty sensitive subject. And I failed to do that. So I get an email. So you knew it had to be a white person.
Yep.
I got an email saying, "You probably hurt some of the black folks in our community when you said X, Y, and Z." And I thought, I don't even remember saying that. I genuinely don't remember saying that. And I didn't remember saying that because it wasn't in my notes.
Right.
But I went back and I looked at the video. Sure enough, I did say that. And it is hurtful, what I said.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to hurt anybody. Of course, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. But that doesn't matter. I did do it. And I did hurt people.
Yeah.
And I remember calling you up and telling you, "Hey, I think I need to own this in front of the church. And so that day we wrote a letter and we sent it out to the whole church of just like what I said, how its impact is hurtful to people, and apologizing for it. And that was a big slice of humble pie. But
kudos to you and the Spirit of God in you. Like when you realize it, you immediately called me and said, "Hey, this is what I did, and I need to make it right."
Yeah.
And so you apologized quickly.
Well, and the only reason I could do that is because my identity isn't in how perfect of a pastor I am. I mean, sometimes it is, but at least on that day, the gospel was true to me.
Yeah.
That Jesus had already forgiven me for this.
Yep.
And the best thing I could do to help our community heal, to the degree that healing was needed from that, was to own it.
Yeah.
I think more people have been hurt by churches that weren't willing to own
definitely
the wrong they've done.
Definitely that.
Than churches that just did wrong.
Yeah.
People know that as a church or as a church leader or as a member in a church, you're going to hurt them from time to time.
Yep.
What they expect is that you'll own it and apologize for it. In my experience, where most church hurt comes from is unapologized hurt.
Yep.
Not just hurt.
Yep.
So that is one of more than one occasions when I screwed up bad. But hopefully in the process, we're able to model something as a leadership team, what that looks like. Okay. We got to go, but before
you are the resident recommender.
Absolutely. And so today, the book I have to recommend, if you want to dig more deeply into apologizing quickly and fully, is this book by Brenda Salter McNeil called Roadmap to Reconciliation.
Yes.
Moving Communities into Unity, Wholeness, and Justice. Roadmap to Reconciliation names repentance and forgiveness as two components of an ongoing process of reconciliation in multiracial spaces, multiracial churches. And she does a really great job of laying out a roadmap for how communities can continually move through the whole reconciliation journey together.
Yeah.
So really recommend this book, Roadmap to Reconciliation. It's short, it's easy to read, and it's really insightful and practical about how communities can move through this process. So,
and she's awesome, by the way.
Oh man, one of the best speakers you're likely to hear.
Oh, boy, she can preach the paint off a wall.
Yes, she can. She can preach the paint off a wall.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. I was going to say fire, but that works even better. That works even better.
Well, that wraps us up for today. Listen, if you like this podcast, if you could like, share, subscribe it, that would be great. Let's just subscribe it.
You can subscribe it.
Share or subscribe. That would be great. And you can reach us at multiracialministry.com.
Yep.
You can find us on all the podcast avenues and on most social media.
That's right. So feel free to engage with us in any one of those ways. We'd love to stay on this journey with you as we move toward God's multiracial kingdom. Thanks for joining us.